Your wedding means nothing, my parents, Richard and Susan, spat during a heated call before their Caribbean cruise. You're the worthless son we cut out. I replied, then watch everything collapse, as I canceled tuition payments and froze accounts. What happened next tore their empire apart forever. None of them attended my wedding, not my mother, Linda, not my father, Michael, not even my sister, Emily. That morning, not one sent a single text. Anyone would assume I'd done something wrong, hurt them, shut them out, or caused a fight. But I hadn't. I'd spent months ensuring the day would feel like a true family gathering. I wanted them there. I expected them there. Sarah, my fiancée, and I planned every detail meticulously. We kept it small, 60 guests, enough for intimacy without seeming extravagant. Her entire family flew in from Florida. Even her uncle, David, who rarely flies, arrived in a wrinkled suit and wept during the ceremony. Her father, James, gave a toast people will remember forever. I kept watching the door, waiting until I said, I do, hoping for a last-second miracle. My mom, Barbara, bursting in, hair pinned up, apologizing like in a dramatic movie. But nothing happened. I got through it by holding on to Sarah's smile, telling myself maybe an emergency had stopped them. It hadn't. 4 days later, scrolling Facebook, I saw the truth. My sister, Jessica, posted a video, glasses clinking with my parents, Robert and Diane, on a cruise ship. All three were tanned, smiling widely, as if they hadn't just ignored the most important day of my life. The caption read, "To real family. Just us." I stared at those words longer than I'd admit. Their friends liked it, flooding the comments with laughing emojis. My dad, Stephen, uploaded more photos. My mom, Patricia, tagged a sunny island. None sent me anything real, just a lazy thumbs up on my wedding photo. I didn't tell Sarah. I didn't speak it aloud. I walked into my home office, logged into the joint trust account I'd kept open out of habit, maybe guilt, and cut them off completely, no access, no warning, no discussion. I wasn't furious in a loud, shouting way. It was quieter, heavier, a betrayal that sank deep. After years of paying their bills, fixing their emergencies, and running the business so they wouldn't work late, this was their answer. They never showed up. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. A week later, fist slammed against my front door, not knocking, but pounding hard, like someone wanted to break it open. The camera showed my dad, Thomas, red-faced, shirt collar stretched, sweat dripping. I opened the door just wide enough to hand him a folder I'd prepared. His puzzled look expected a hug or a fight, not paperwork. "You're finished," I said. "This is where you start without me." I closed the door. Inside were papers cutting him out of the business for good, the last piece of ownership he had. He never realized I'd been planning this for over a year, slowly transferring everything into my name through every contract, filing, and change. He never noticed because he never read the details. The next morning, he returned, not alone. A man in a gray suit, William, stood with him, no greetings, just a clipboard and a smirk. He read aloud, "Mr. Johnson requests restitution of 40% of all business profits from fiscal year 2022 until today, citing verbal agreements in initial funding." His tone sounded like we were already in court. My dad, Charles, stood with arms folded, acting like he'd won a chess game. Looking at him made me feel sick, like something was rotting inside. "You really believe you built this?" I asked. He opened his mouth to repeat his tired speech, how he gave me a start, supported me when no one cared, how the company was ours. It's true, at 25, he gave me $18,000 and helped secure my first contract. His friend's construction firm needed a website, and I built it in 3 sleepless nights. But that was where his help ended. I worked 14-hour days, juggling freelance jobs, learning taxes, branding, and invoicing. After the first year, he did nothing but brag at cookouts about his business. The lawyer, Mark, droned on about verbal contracts and vague legacy ownership claims. I stayed silent until he finished, then handed him a thick manila folder, payment records, transfer papers, meeting notes, every decision from the last 3 years. I'd spent a year ensuring I was untouchable legally. "Go ahead and test it," I told him. "This company is mine." Mark skimmed a few pages, frowned, and turned to Charles with a look that said he hadn't been told the full truth. Charles stood still, breathing hard through his nose. They walked away without a word. That night, my truck's tires were slashed, deep, deliberate cuts. I didn't need cameras to know it was him. I replaced them quietly, telling no one. The next night, someone poured bright blue paint across the office stairs, letting it drip like a sign. Fake 1-star reviews appeared online, fraud, scam, untrustworthy, all posted within hours. 2 days later, the office sign wasn't missing, it was smashed, wood scattered, letters kicked in. They didn't want to steal, they wanted to humiliate. I knew who was behind it but didn't call the police. That wasn't the battle I wanted. Instead, I picked up the phone. 9 months earlier, when my sister, Rachel, got into an out-of-state university, my dad, Paul, called late, saying she couldn't afford it, that it would tear the family apart. I'd agreed to cover her tuition, $27,500 paid directly to the school through a scheduled plan. That night, I called the university's finance office. "Cancel all upcoming payments linked to my account for her tuition," I said. They agreed instantly, no questions asked. An hour later, Paul and my mom, Karen, tried calling. I ignored them. That evening, Sarah and I had dinner with her parents, John and Lisa. I stayed quiet, but they sensed something had changed. John pulled me aside and said, "You know we're here for you, right?" I nodded. It felt strange finding support from someone else's parents while cutting ties with my own. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. The next 3 days were still, no broken glass, no new damage, just silence. I kept waiting for their next move, but it didn't come as expected. No big attack, no outburst, just quiet. In that silence, I realized everything had changed. Early Thursday morning, while reviewing forms for a new client, my phone showed 7 missed calls, 4 from my dad, David, 2 from my mom, Nancy, and 1 from an unknown number. I ignored them. If it mattered, they'd leave a message. Only David did. I didn't listen. Half an hour later, pounding started, not polite knocking, but heavy, angry hits. The camera showed Nancy hitting the glass door, already crying. I opened it to avoid a scene in front of employees. She shoved past like she still had the right. No apology came. She launched into panic: college office, overdue bill, rejected payment, probation status. My sister, Laura, had received an email that morning. If the amount wasn't paid in 48 hours, she'd be locked out of classes. Her schedule was already frozen. "She can't lose her spot, Brian," Nancy begged, as if I didn't know I'd been secretly paying since Laura's acceptance, while they toasted to "real family" on cruises. I stood silent as she sobbed. I didn't ask how she could raise a glass on vacation yet miss my wedding. I didn't mention the smashed sign, slashed tires, or months without a call. When she finished, I opened the door and stepped aside. She paused, expecting me to speak, but I owed her nothing. That night, a voicemail from my dad, Richard, came through, not loud or angry, but different. He said things had spun out of control, called it a family mistake, and used overreaction twice. Then, he added, "You know, she's just a kid, right? You're punishing her for something she couldn't control." But Laura wasn't a child. She was 23, old enough to clink glasses to "real family" in that video, to ignore my wedding, to enjoy a cruise I partly funded while pretending I didn't exist. A text from Laura followed, her first in months. "Mom says you're not paying for school anymore. Is this really happening? No, how are you? No, sorry, no, I should have been there. Just a bill disguised as concern." I replied with 2 words, "It is." Sent. The next few days were silent, no smashed glass, no slashed tires, no visits. They finally understood I wasn't bluffing. They expected me to explode and cool down, but I wasn't acting on emotion. I was done. For days later, I ran into my mom, Deborah, at the grocery store. She walked slowly, aimlessly. Our eyes met briefly. She looked away. Neither of us spoke. I walked on, feeling no guilt for the first time. That's when it hit me: they hadn't just skipped my wedding. They'd made a choice. And now, they were paying the price. The silence wasn't regret, it was desperation. By the second week's end, whispers reached me through acquaintances, neighbors, and my dad's former coworker, Tom. People asked odd questions. Was everything okay? Were the rumors true? Had my dad, George, stepped away from the business? Had my sister, Megan, quit school? One even asked if I was ill. They'd started spreading their version, that I was selfish, that I'd cut them off over one small gathering, that I'd taken the company. That word, taken, kept surfacing. They didn't know about the signed documents, email records, months of silence, the cruise, the champagne toast without me. Outsiders never see the full picture, and I wasn't about to explain myself to everyone who'd heard Deborah crying in public. They weren't fighting to reconnect anymore, they were fighting to save face. Then, on a rainy Tuesday, 2 weeks after the last call, a single knock came. The camera showed my sister, Ashley, soaked, holding a closed umbrella and a backpack. I hadn't seen her since she promised to help with wedding preparations, then vanished. I opened the door. She stayed silent, hair dripping, then handed me a sealed envelope. "I'm not staying," she said. "But read this." Before I could speak, she walked to a car I didn't recognize. Inside was a university withdrawal form, 1 page, with a handwritten note. I didn't know what they were planning. I just went along with it. I sat at the kitchen table, staring. It was the first admission of truth, that it wasn't an accident, but deliberate. That evening, Sarah found me in the yard. She asked if I was okay. I told her about the envelope and Ashley's note. Sarah said, "You don't have to fix this." It stopped me cold. For the first time, I believed it. I didn't have to be the peacemaker, clean up their mess, or owe them another chance just because of blood. Something inside me let go. Ashley never contacted me again, no texts, no emails. I expected her to ask for money, but the silence held, less like manipulation, more like surrender. Sarah's family stayed constant. Her mom, Linda, called every few days. Her dad, Michael, invited me to lunch to talk work. Before the wedding, I felt out of place with them. After everything, they saw me clearly, not for what I'd lost, but how I carried myself through it. Late one night, an email from a debt collection agency arrived, addressed to my parents, Stephen and Patricia, but copied to an old business account I'd closed. It demanded $68,000 for house renovations and a non-existent business line. I didn't reply. The next morning, a text from Patricia, "Can we talk? It's serious." I ignored it. That day, Stephen showed up at a job site, chatting with an employee like nothing had happened. When I approached, he forced a smile. "You've made your point," he said. "But we've got expenses. I doubt you want Ashley to sink in this." His usual trick, guilt dressed as concern. I asked, "Are you still telling people I stole the company?" He looked away, silent. I nodded, returned inside, and told my project manager to watch the equipment closely. Over the next week, news trickled in. Ashley had been flagged for unpaid housing fees. Stephen and Patricia were renting out rooms in their house, something they hadn't done in a decade. Patricia posted in a local Facebook group, offering homemade dinners for $12 a plate. Then I heard Stephen had taken a night manager job at an auto parts store. The man who bragged about our empire was now breaking down cardboard boxes at 1 a.m. They didn't lose it all at once, it slipped away, just as they tried to strip things from me. I didn't laugh or cheer, but I didn't help either. When everything collapsed, money gone, debts piling up, they stopped trying. No calls, no lawyers, no visits, no messages through neighbors. Stephen and Patricia were too busy staying afloat. Ashley erased her social media, dorm selfies one day, gone the next. I assumed she moved back home but didn't care enough to check. Sarah never pushed for details. From our engagement dinner, she sensed their disregard. My parents, Richard and Diane, barely acknowledged her, complaining about the venue instead. Sarah stayed back, not out of bitterness, but self-respect. After the collapse, she stopped treating them like fragile glass. One night at her parents' house, her dad, James, told a story about building his first home. Her mom, Susan, laughed until she nearly cried. I listened quietly. Sarah whispered, "This is what family feels like." She was right. Her family was there for the wedding, stood by me through the chaos, and never kept score. My family lost the business, the money, and the future they thought I owed them. They bet I'd always forgive, always pay, always be responsible. When I stopped, they had nothing. I never went back, not when they rented out their basement, not when Stephen's car was repossessed, not when Ashley posted a vague quote about hard lessons. They faded from my life, not dramatically, but completely. I sold the old office, rebranded the company, and bought new property with Sarah's father, David. He now sits on the board. The man who once doubted me became the closest thing to a father I've had in years. Last week, at dinner with Sarah's parents, her mom, Linda, gave me a framed photo of us four at the wedding, my smile genuine for the first time in ages. Sarah leaned close and whispered, "This is where we start." And it was true. A month later, the silence stretched on, hollow like an empty hall. I assumed that was the end. They'd chosen their side. I stopped checking for missed calls. Sarah and I planned a coastal trip to clear our heads before the business's next chapter. Then, out of nowhere, a letter arrived, a real paper invitation, my name in gold trim, listing a restaurant my parents, Michael and Nancy, used to take me to for good grades. Sarah asked if I wanted to go. At first, I said no. Then, after thinking, I said maybe, not for forgiveness, but to hear their excuses now that their world had collapsed. I went. My parents, Robert and Patricia, and my sister, Emily, stood as I entered, like actors in a staged reconciliation. Patricia hugged me as if nothing had happened. Robert pulled out a chair. Emily's smile tried to look natural but failed. We sat for 20 minutes, almost ordinary. They asked about the company and Sarah. Robert bragged that someone at his country club said we were thriving. Emily mentioned applying to community college for a fresh start. I nodded politely. Then Patricia shifted, talking about their hard year, how things fell apart, how they made mistakes but didn't deserve to be outcasts. She claimed I'd always had it easier, that I didn't understand their sacrifices. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I looked at her and said, "Do you think this was easy for me? You skipped my wedding. You toasted on a cruise while I stood at the altar alone. You never called, never texted, just clicked, like, on a post. Then you tried to claim what you didn't earn. None of this was easy." The table fell silent. I hadn't raised my voice, but I was clear. Robert shook his head, saying, "You don't have to keep punishing us." That word, punishing, revealed everything. They still thought they were the victims, that I was cruel for setting boundaries. Emily leaned back, eyes wet, as if my honesty wounded her. I pushed my chair back, stood, and said, "There's nothing left to discuss." I walked out. Nobody followed. At home, Sarah saw my face, walked over, and held me. That was the real ending. No more dinners, no more attempts, no more family that only appears when the money's gone.